In the shadow of the Rockies, where the mountains looked like ancient titans rising above a frozen world, Riley Morgan gripped the steering wheel of her department truck so tight her knuckles went white. Outside, the snowstorm raged, howling against the windshield, swallowing the world in a blur of white and gray. Every few seconds, the headlights caught swirling flakes so thick it was like driving through a tunnel with no end. Her breath fogged the glass as she exhaled, tension etched into every line of her face. Big Sky, Montana, was not a forgiving place in winter. It was a land that demanded respect, a place where even a seasoned deputy like Riley could feel very, very small. The radio crackled beside her, static drowning out the dispatcher's words. Riley barely noticed. Her mind was on the call that had come through an hour ago, a vague report of strange animal activity near Hollow Creek, far from any house, at the edge of the wildlife refuge. Normally, animal calls were left for animal control. But they were already stretched thin tonight, and something about the urgency in the caller's voice had stuck with her. Beside her, Ben Harlow, the wildlife tech, was trying to make sense of the flickering GPS on his phone. He was younger than Riley, with a kind of earnestness that made him both endearing and, at times like this, slightly irritating. "It should be another mile," he said, squinting at the map, "if we don't end up in a snowbank first." Riley managed a thin smile. "You always this optimistic in a blizzard, Ben?" Ben shrugged, but his face was tight with worry. "Montana storms have a way of making optimists out of all of us. Or making us fools. Maybe both." The road narrowed, trees crowding in from both sides, branches heavy with snow. In the silence between the gusts, the only sound was the grinding of the tires on ice. Then, as they rounded a curve, Riley heard it, a sound that sliced through the storm, primal and haunting. A howl. Not the mournful cry of a lone wolf, not the distant yip of coyotes. This was something else. It was raw, desperate, almost human in its anguish. Riley felt her heart jolt. "Did you hear that?" Ben nodded, eyes wide. "I've never heard anything like that out here." "That's not normal, Riley." Another howl followed, sharper, more frantic. Without thinking, Riley pulled the truck to the shoulder, tires crunching over the packed snow. "We're going to check it out, grab the med kit, and Ben, stay close." They stepped out into the storm. Instantly, the wind bit through Riley's coat, stealing the warmth from her skin. Snow whipped at her face, stinging her cheeks and eyes. Every step forward was a battle, boots sinking into drifts. Riley's flashlight beam barely cut through the swirling white. The world shrank down to the circle of light in front of them and the unyielding darkness beyond. Ben caught up, shivering, holding the med kit in one gloved hand. "Riley, protocol says we shouldn't leave the vehicle in this kind of weather if something happens." Riley cut him off with a glance. "I know the rules. Something's out there. It needs help. Protocol can wait." As they moved deeper into the woods, the howling came again, so close it made Riley's pulse jump, but now it was fainter, more desperate. She pressed forward, branches snapping against her jacket, breath coming in sharp gasps. The snow seemed to close in, as if the forest itself was trying to swallow her whole. For a moment, Riley thought she saw a shape move between the trees, a flash of dark fur low to the ground. She raised her hand, motioning for Ben to stop. They listened. There, a soft whimpering now, almost lost in the storm's fury. Riley edged forward, heart pounding. In the narrow beam of her flashlight, she finally saw it. A German shepherd, nearly buried in a snowdrift, curled protectively around something small and shivering. The dog's fur was matted with ice, eyes glassy with exhaustion, but it lifted its head at Riley's approach, baring its teeth in a low growl. Even in its weakened state, it was ready to defend. "Easy," Riley whispered, kneeling in the snow, keeping her movements slow and non-threatening. "We're here to help, boy." Ben knelt beside her, pulling out a blanket from the kit. "There's a pup," he murmured. "A tiny one. Must be only a few weeks old." The German shepherd tightened its hold, curling its body tighter around the pup. Riley could see blood on the dog's leg, a deep gash, half frozen. The pup mewled weakly, pressing against the adult's warmth. "We need to move them, now," Riley said. She reached out slowly, her voice steady and calm. "It's okay. We're friends. Let us help." The shepherd watched her, suspicion warring with desperation. For a heartbeat, Riley saw something in its eyes: fear, hope, a silent plea for help. Then, with a final shudder, the dog went limp, barely conscious, still refusing to let go of the pup. Ben looked at Riley, panic flickering in his gaze. "If we don't get them out of here, they'll freeze before backup arrives." Riley nodded, making a quick decision. She scooped the shepherd into her arms, feeling the dog's ragged breath against her chest, while Ben bundled the tiny pup in the blanket. The wait was awkward, but adrenaline fueled Riley's steps as they trudged back toward the truck, the storm clawing at them with every step. The world shrank to the sound of her own breathing and the beating of her heart. Riley slipped once, nearly falling, but she refused to let go. The shepherd whimpered, clinging to consciousness. Ben's face was red with cold, his jaw set with determination. At last, they reached the truck. Riley set the shepherd on the back seat, wrapping him in her own jacket, while Ben cradled the pup against the heater vents. For a moment, Riley just sat there, catching her breath, her hands trembling. She looked at the dog and the pup, survivors, battered but unbroken. She felt something deep inside her shift, an old wound stirring, as if the storm outside was trying to reach the one raging inside her chest. As the snow battered the windows and the storm howled, Riley whispered, almost to herself, "Hang in there. We're not leaving you behind." The night was far from over, and the blizzard had only just begun. The truck's engine rumbled, barely audible beneath the relentless roar of the storm. Inside, warmth bled from the heater, but tension filled the cab, thick as the swirling snow outside. Riley kept glancing into the back seat, where the German shepherd, barely clinging to consciousness, lay curled around the shivering pup. Every so often, the adult dog would open its eyes, just enough to fix Riley with a haunted, questioning stare, then drift away again, driven by sheer exhaustion and pain. Ben, his fingers trembling as he held the bundled pup, struggled to find the right words. "He's burning up, Riley. I think he's in shock." Riley nodded, jaw set. "We can't wait for animal control or a vet to come out in this. Wildlife Center's closer. We'll head there and pray they still have power." With the snow thickening and visibility dropping to just a few feet, Riley drove with more instinct than sight, following muscle memory through back roads and half-remembered turns. It was as if the storm wanted to keep them trapped out here, fighting for every inch of progress, the wind rattling the frame as if in warning. At last they pulled up outside the Hollow Creek Wildlife Center, a low, weathered building pressed against the edge of the forest. Snow had drifted up nearly to the windowsills. The center looked deserted, its signs swaying in the wind, a single outside light casting long, lonely shadows across the lot. Riley pressed her radio, but it spat only static. Ben's voice was barely above a whisper. "I hope Kate's here. If she isn't, she'll be here," Riley said, trying to sound confident for both their sakes. She grabbed the med kit and bundled the shepherd in her arms again, Ben cradling the pup, and together they forced their way through the knee-high drifts to the entrance. The door groaned open, letting in a blast of snow. Inside, it was only marginally warmer. The lobby was dim, emergency lights flickering weakly. From somewhere down the hall, a lantern's glow bobbed. A tall figure striding into view, boots crunching on tile. Dr. Kate Alvarez appeared like a storm herself, dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense braid, eyes sharp with fatigue and intelligence. Even exhaustion couldn't hide the intensity in her posture, the way she scanned Riley, Ben, the dogs, all in a single, practiced glance. Her left hand, scarred and stiff, betrayed old wounds, ones she rarely talked about. "Get them in the back. Exam room," Kate commanded, voice brisk but not unkind. She moved quickly, setting down her lantern and clearing space on a stainless steel table. Riley and Ben laid the shepherd and pup down gently. Kate immediately went to work, pulling on gloves and inspecting the injuries with expert hands. "No power. Generators out," she muttered, "but I have blankets, warm saline, and adrenaline if we need it." Riley, find the battery lantern. Ben, keep the pup warm against your skin. That's right. Zip your jacket around her. The shepherd whimpered, tensing as Kate examined the deep gash on his leg. She worked quickly, irrigating the wound with saline warmed by her own body heat, then wrapping it in clean gauze. She checked the dog's heartbeat, listened to his shallow breaths, then turned to the pup, eyes narrowing with concern. Dehydrated, hypothermic. You got here just in time, Kate said. Her voice softened as she stroked the adult's muzzle. Hey, big guy. You're safe now, I promise. For the first time, Riley noticed a battered collar around the shepherd's neck. The tag was tarnished, barely legible. She leaned closer, brushing frost from the surface. There, scratched in clumsy block letters, were two simple words. Protect him. Riley and Kate exchanged a look. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that this was no ordinary rescue. This dog had been given a mission, a responsibility, and whatever had happened out there, he had nearly died trying to fulfill it. Ben swallowed. Do you think someone meant for us to find them? Kate's lips tightened. In my experience, there are no accidents out here. Someone wanted this dog to keep that pup safe, and he damn near gave his life to do it. Outside, the wind slammed against the walls, rattling windows in their frames. The building creaked, as if protesting the storm's relentless assault. Inside, shadows moved in the lantern light. It felt less like a safe haven and more like a fragile sanctuary, a place where hope flickered, stubbornly refusing to die. Suddenly, the lights blinked, then died completely. Total darkness swallowed the room. Ben's breath hitched. No, please, not now. Riley fumbled for the lantern, her hands shaking. She clicked it on, the feeble glow just enough to push back the darkness. Kate didn't pause, her focus absolute. It's okay. We work in the dark if we have to. These dogs are alive because you didn't leave them out there. That's what matters. Minutes crawled by. Riley sat on the edge of a chair, heart hammering, unable to look away from the shepherd's slow, rhythmic breathing. She was struck by the resilience in this animal. The way he had refused to let go, even at death's door. There was something almost heroic in it, a quiet courage that felt achingly familiar. The storm pressed closer, shrieking around the corners of the building. Ben tried to distract himself by talking softly to the pup, whispering nonsense words of comfort, his voice trembling but steadying with each moment. The shepherd, for his part, began to stir. His eyelids fluttered. He lifted his head, surveying the room with a wary intelligence. Kate knelt beside him, keeping her movements slow and gentle. That's it, boy. Stay with me. She offered a scrap of beef jerky, emergency rations, but the best she had. The shepherd sniffed, then slowly accepted the offering, his eyes never leaving Kate's face. As the blizzard's fury grew outside, the 3 humans and 2 dogs huddled in the dim glow, listening to the wind's wrath. Riley was the first to speak, breaking the silence with a quiet, almost reverent awe. He saved that pup. Whatever else happened out there, he chose to protect him. Kate nodded, looking at Riley over the shepherd's head. And now it's our turn to protect both of them. In that moment, something shifted. The shelter, battered by the storm, became more than just 4 walls and a roof. It became a promise, a fragile alliance against a world that could be cruel and wild. Riley felt it deep inside, the bond that forms between those who have suffered and survived, who have chosen, against all odds, to keep fighting. As the night deepened, the storm showed no signs of mercy. They were alone here, cut off from the outside world, with nothing but their determination and the warmth of their makeshift family. But in that darkness, hope lived, a flickering light that would not be snuffed out. The dog's eyes glimmered in the lantern light, full of secrets and sorrow and something else. Trust. Riley reached out, her hand gentle. Rest easy, boy. We're not giving up on you. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the world in white. Inside, surrounded by shadows and the fragile promise of safety, Riley, Ben, and Kate stood together, 3 hearts, and 2 wounded souls, fighting for life against the cold. And somewhere in the silence, the shepherd's tail thumped, just once, in quiet agreement. The wind outside howled like a living thing, clawing at the battered walls of the Hollow Creek Wildlife Center. Inside, the world shrank to the pool of lantern light and the tight circle of 3 exhausted humans and 2 fragile survivors. For a long time, no one spoke. The silence inside was thick with exhaustion, fear, and something else, an unspoken sense of responsibility that weighed heavier than the snow piling up outside. Kate checked the German shepherd's bandages, her movements calm but relentless. The big dog shivered with fever, his breaths shallow, but his eyes, so intelligent and deep, followed her every move. The tiny pup, now nestled against Ben's chest inside his jacket, whimpered occasionally, but seemed to draw comfort from the steady thump of his heart. Suddenly, a deep groan echoed through the dark corridor, a sound that made Riley's pulse leap. She reached for her flashlight, heart pounding, scanning the hallway beyond, but it was only the wind pressing on a loose window pane, a stark reminder of how vulnerable they all were out here, with no power and no outside help. Just for a moment, Riley caught her own reflection in the dark glass, her face pale, eyes haunted, older than she remembered. How many times had she been forced to improvise, to find hope in hopeless places? But this time, it felt different, more personal. Kate glanced at Riley, reading the tension in her jaw. It's going to be a long night. We're safe for now, but that dog needs fluids and real warmth. If the generator doesn't come back, we'll make do, Riley said, her voice firmer than she felt. She moved to the shelves, pulling down extra blankets and a battered thermos of instant coffee. Ben set the pup on a towel-lined tray near the lantern's warmth, careful to tuck her in gently. Then, a sharp knock startled all of them, a hollow, almost desperate sound at the back door. Riley's hand went to her holster out of habit. But before anyone could react, the door pushed open, letting in a rush of freezing air, and a man stumbled in, bundled in a sheriff's parka, his cheeks red and beard crusted with ice. It was Sheriff Ellis, Riley's boss. Relief flickered in Riley's eyes. Ellis, I thought you weren't on duty tonight. Ellis shook the snow from his shoulders, stamping his boots. I was heading home when a dispatch lost your signal. Figured I'd check on you before the roads got worse. Didn't expect to find the power out and the place looking like a war zone. You 3 all right? Kate gestured to the dogs. We're alive, but these 2 need help more than we do. Ellis moved closer, inspecting the shepherd and the pup. He let out a low whistle. Poor thing, you pick a hell of a night to play hero, Morgan. Riley allowed herself a weary smile. Wasn't about to leave them to freeze. We don't know exactly what happened out there, but she held up the dog's tag. Someone gave him a job. Protect him. That's all it says. Ellis frowned, his brow creasing. You ever seen this dog before? Kate shook her head. No, but look. She turned the shepherd's collar, revealing a tiny, nearly faded tattoo on the inside. That's an old rancher's mark. Means this dog was part of a working line. Maybe a search and rescue or therapy dog. Ben brightened. That would explain his instincts. He wouldn't leave the pup, even at the end. The mention of therapy dogs seemed to trigger something in Riley's memory, but before she could reach for it, a flicker of light came from the office hallway. For a second, she thought it might be the generator sputtering back to life, but it was only the storm, teasing with false hope. Riley poured coffee for everyone, scalding, bitter, but a blessing in the dark. She crouched beside the shepherd, stroking his ears gently. What's your name, big guy? How did you get here? The shepherd didn't answer, of course, but his gaze was clear now, steady. He licked her hand, a single, trusting gesture. Kate smiled. He's got the heart of a warrior. If he makes it through tonight, it'll be a miracle. Ben, sipping coffee and rubbing warmth back into his hands, asked, Do you think he's got family, or is the pup his only charge? Riley shrugged, staring into the darkness. All I know is, he chose to stay alive for that little one. That means something. Maybe he lost his people. Maybe he was left out there. Doesn't matter. He did what he was asked to do. For the first time, Ben looked hopeful. Maybe he can stay here with us if he survives. Kate's face softened, but she didn't answer. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. He needs fluids. Ben, hand me the saline bag. Ben scrambled to comply, threading the IV line with shaking hands. Kate worked in silence, murmuring to the shepherd, who watched her with patient, unwavering trust. Ellis stood by the window, peering out into the dark, snow-choked world. Road's gone. We're stuck here till sunrise, at least. Riley sat cross-legged on the floor, the shepherd's head in her lap. She thought about all the rescues she'd done, all the times she'd felt powerless to change things. But here, with this dog in his charge, something felt different. Like the universe was giving her a second chance, not just to save someone else, but to heal a part of herself she'd kept buried for years. Suddenly, the pup let out a sharp, piping yelp, a cry of hunger. Ben scrambled, opening a can of formula he'd found in the supply cabinet, warming it with his hands before offering it on a tiny bottle. The pup latched on greedily, eyes half closed with relief. The shepherd watched, tense, until the feeding was done. Only then did he seem to relax, pressing closer to Riley's side. Kate finished setting the IV. There, that's the best we can do without a real clinic. Now it's just a matter of waiting. The storm roared on, relentless. They took shifts, dozing in chairs, watching over their charges. Once, Ben thought he heard something outside, a distant engine maybe, or just the wind playing tricks. But when he shone his flashlight into the blizzard, there was only endless white. As midnight crept closer, something changed in the air, a kind of peace settling over the tiny group. They were battered, stranded, but alive. And for the first time in a long while, Riley allowed herself to hope. She glanced at Kate, Ben, Sheriff Ellis, and the two dogs. This, she thought, is what family looks like. Not always blood, but those who show up in the dark, who stay and fight when the world goes cold. And in the soft glow of lantern light, the shepherd lifted his head as if sensing Riley's thoughts. He thumped his tail, just once, in silent promise. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, hope was alive, and growing stronger with every heartbeat. The wind never relented. The Hollow Creek Wildlife Center became its own world, cut off, battered, wrapped in darkness. The only constants were the shuttering windows and the low, rhythmic breathing of two battered canines. Hours crawled by, marked by nothing but the ticking of Ben's watch and the scratch of Kate's pen as she jotted updates about the shepherd's condition by flashlight. By midnight, the blizzard had reached its peak. The snow struck the building in fierce waves, rattling the doors and piling higher by the minute. Ellis was asleep in a hard-backed chair, his hand resting on his holster, even in sleep. Kate dozed at the exam table, her head pillowed on her arm, near the shepherd's side. A stethoscope still looped around her neck. Ben was curled in a pile of old blankets, the tiny pup nestled against his chest. Riley tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind spun with questions and fear. About the shepherd, about the strange message on the tag, about the way this night had forced them together. She paced the dark lobby, every so often pressing her ear to the window, listening to the storm and the strange silence beneath it. Suddenly, a sharp, guttural growl split the quiet. It was the shepherd. He was awake, every muscle tense, hackles raised. Riley rushed to his side, finding his eyes wide and alert, focused on the door leading outside. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, her hand gentle on his head. The shepherd barely glanced at her. Instead, he inched forward, teeth bared, a low warning rumbling in his chest. Kate snapped awake instantly, eyes flashing to the dog, then to Riley. "Something's wrong," she murmured. She woke Ben and Ellis with a firm shake. Ellis sat upright, hand on his gun, Ben clutching the pup protectively. They listened. For a moment there was nothing but the wind, but then, beneath it, a subtle crunching, like footsteps, slow and cautious, moving across the snow just outside the cabin. Someone, or something, was out there, circling in the darkness. Riley's breath caught. No one could make it out here in this storm. No one except Ellis, already on his feet, motioned for silence. He moved to the window, peering out into the white void. There was nothing but swirling snow. Then a dark shape flitted across the edge of the security light, too quick to see clearly. The shepherd surged to his feet, ignoring pain and fatigue. He planted himself in front of the door, body low and rigid, a living barrier between his people and whatever threat lurked outside. The pup whimpered, sensing the tension. Kate grabbed her flashlight and whispered, "We need to barricade the doors, just in case." Working quickly, but quietly, they stacked chairs and heavy bins against both entrances, careful not to block the shepherd's sightline to the door. Riley's pulse hammered in her throat. She kept her sidearm close, but hoped it wouldn't come to that. They waited, breathless. The storm muffled everything, but the sense of danger was impossible to shake. Every gust of wind sounded like a fist at the walls. Every shadow outside seemed alive. Suddenly, something banged hard against the side door. Once, twice, as if testing the strength of the lock. The shepherd lunged forward, barking so fiercely the sound seemed to vibrate the windows. Ellis flung himself beside the dog, gun drawn, while Riley flicked off the lantern, plunging the room into deeper darkness. "Stay down," she hissed at Ben and Kate. The four of them huddled in the shadows, the shepherd growling in the dark, eyes burning like embers. Outside, silence. Then, a voice, muffled and distorted by wind and distance. It was impossible to tell what it said, but the tone was unmistakable. Cold, angry, searching. The shepherd pressed himself tighter against the door, refusing to budge. Ben's breath shuddered. "Do you think it's whoever left the dog out there?" Kate shook her head, her face pale but determined. "Whoever it is, they know about us. Maybe they were following the dog. Maybe they want him back." Ellis kept his gun trained on the door, jaw clenched. "Let's hope they realize we're not alone." Minutes crawled by. The storm covered any trace of footsteps, but the sense of being watched never left. At last, the banging stopped. The darkness outside settled again, thick and watchful. They dared not move the barricade or turn the lights back on. Instead, they sat in a tense circle, the shepherd standing sentinel at the door, every muscle coiled. The hours ticked by, slow and torturous. The storm howled on, relentless. In the stillness, fear and uncertainty gnawed at everyone. Even the pup seemed to sense it, whining quietly until Ben hummed a tune under his breath, a lullaby, shaky but soothing. Finally, the shepherd relaxed, though he never moved far from the door. Riley knelt beside him, whispering praise. "You did good, Ranger. You kept us safe." She hesitated at the name. It slipped out naturally, but it fit him. Strong, steadfast, always guarding. Kate heard the name and smiled, relief in her eyes. "Ranger, that's perfect." "Yeah," Ben whispered. "He's earned it." Dawn was still hours away, but exhaustion and adrenaline mixed in Riley's veins. She leaned against the shepherd, Ranger now, and let her eyes close for the first time all night. The pup, finally calm, curled into a tight ball beside her. Outside, the storm's rage began to wane, though danger still lingered beyond the fragile shelter of their walls. Inside, in the dark, they clung to each other, the beginnings of a pack, forged in fear and courage. And somewhere out there, in the bitter cold and drifting snow, Riley knew the threat was not gone, only waiting. But so were they. And with Ranger standing guard, hope felt like something real, something strong enough to survive the night. Dawn came slow and gray, the storm finally losing its grip on the world outside. By the time the first thin ribbons of daylight cut through the cracks in the boarded windows, everyone inside Hollow Creek Wildlife Center was running on nerves and exhaustion. The wind had fallen silent, replaced by a heavy, unnatural stillness, like the land itself was holding its breath. Riley was the first to move, stiff and aching from a night spent half sleeping against the wall. Ranger, the German shepherd, had barely closed his eyes all night, refusing to leave his post near the door. Ben was still curled protectively around the pup, who now slept deeply for the first time since her rescue. Kate sat at the exam table, scribbling notes by lantern light, her eyes red but focused. Ellis stretched with a groan, rubbing at his neck. "We survived the night," he said quietly, as if afraid of breaking the fragile peace. But Ranger's ears snapped forward. He growled, low and alert, eyes locked on the window. Riley followed his gaze and felt her own tension return, sharper than any winter chill. "Something's out there," she said. She pulled on her coat and boots, nodded to Ben and Kate. "Stay here, Ellis. Come with me. Let's see what the storm left behind." Ellis loaded his service pistol, the weight of it heavy in his hand. "You sure about this, Riley?" She nodded. "We can't stay trapped in here forever. If there's someone watching us, we need to know." Together, they forced open the side door, pushing against the wall of snow that had drifted nearly waist-high. The morning was eerily quiet. Every surface glittered with frost, the trees heavy with ice. It was beautiful, in a way, but Riley's skin prickled with unease. As they stepped into the yard, Ranger insisted on coming with them. He moved ahead, nose to the ground, muscles tense. It didn't take long before he stopped dead in his tracks, hackles raised, a deep growl building in his chest. Riley saw it almost immediately, a faint trail in the snow, the red stark against the white, a thin line of blood, half covered by new snow but still visible. It led away from the building, deeper into the woods behind the center. Ellis frowned, crouching to examine the trail. Could be from a wounded animal, or... Riley shook her head. "It's too fresh. It's not the dog's blood. He hasn't been out since last night." This happened after the storm started. They exchanged a grim look. Ranger whined, pawing at the edge of the trail. Without another word, Riley led the way. Following the blood through the trees, Ranger pressed close to her leg. The woods were silent, except for the crunch of snow beneath their boots and Ranger's steady panting. Every step felt loaded with dread. The trail twisted through the trees, occasionally disappearing where the wind had swept the ground clean, only to reappear on the other side of a fallen log or a tangle of brush. Ellis broke the silence. "You really think someone tried to get in last night?" "I think someone did get close," Riley answered. "But why leave a blood trail? If it was an animal, it would have tried to hide. If it was a person..." She trailed off, her thoughts turning dark. Eventually the trail led them to the edge of an old chain-link fence, half buried in snow, tangled with dead vines. Beyond it stood a low, sprawling building, faded letters on the door barely readable. Willow Ridge, Animal Recovery. Riley's heart skipped. This place was shut down years ago. Funding dried up, and there were rumors, abuse, neglect, animals going missing. Ellis cursed under his breath. "If someone's using it again..." Ranger barked once, sharp and urgent. Riley unlatched the gate and stepped inside, gun drawn, every sense straining. The front office was a mess. Papers scattered, furniture broken. The air thick with the stale scent of mold and something worse. Blood drops continued through the main corridor, vanishing into shadow. "Check every door," Ellis ordered, sweeping left as Riley and Ranger pressed deeper inside. In the main intake room, Riley's flashlight beam caught the glint of metal. Rows of kennels, most standing open and empty, their doors twisted and bent. Claw marks and tufts of fur were everywhere. It looked like there had been a fight, or a desperate escape. Riley knelt, studying the floor. More blood, mixed with muddy paw prints, large and small. Ranger nosed at a discarded collar, then stiffened, growling at a dark stain near the far wall. Riley followed, heart hammering. There, on a broken chair, lay a stack of intake files, half frozen and stained. She flipped through them, hands trembling. The names were all animals, mostly dogs, some cats, all with notations like program and terminated scrawled beside their entries. The last page in the pile made Riley freeze. A color photo, crumpled and stained, showing a smiling boy in a wheelchair, hugging a much younger Ranger. Written in a shaky hand beneath the photo, "Therapy partner, Max and Ranger." Riley stared at the photo, mind racing. He was someone's lifeline, not just a stray, a therapy dog. Ellis came up behind her, a grim look on his face. Looks like this place was more than a shelter, maybe a front for something else. Why else erase records, destroy cages, run off into a storm? Riley tucked the photo into her jacket. "We need to get out of here. Now. Whoever bled here, it's not safe to linger. On their way out, they found more evidence of violence. A broken phone, shattered glass, clawed doors. Whatever happened last night, it was chaos. Ranger stayed close, pausing at every corner, body trembling with the memory of fear or maybe anger. They retraced their steps through the snow, hearts heavy with the weight of what they'd found. When they returned to the Wildlife Center, Ben and Kate met them at the door, worry written all over their faces. Riley laid the photo on the table. His name's Ranger. He belonged to a boy named Max, a therapy team. I think they were both here at Willow Ridge before everything went wrong. Kate's face softened with sorrow. We need to find Max. And whoever's after Ranger and the pup, we have to stay ahead of them. Outside, the snow had stopped, but the world was no less dangerous. The blood trail was a warning, and a promise that the mystery of the storm was only just beginning to unfold. Inside, Ranger and the pup huddled close, surrounded by their unlikely family. In the gathering light, Riley vowed to protect them. She understood, better than ever, that some scars, human or animal, ran deeper than flesh, but hope, even blood-stained, had a way of surviving. And as Ranger looked up at her, eyes filled with memories and unspoken loyalty, Riley made herself a new promise. I won't let you down. Not this time. Back at Hollow Creek Wildlife Center, the fragile calm was shattered by the chill that followed Riley and Ellis's return. Ben and Kate pored over the files Riley had found, their faces growing more troubled with every page. The photo of Max and Ranger rested at the center of the table, a reminder of all they'd lost and all they still stood to lose. Ranger limped to the windows, nose pressed to the cold glass, his body still tense. The pup stuck close to his side, a tiny shadow to his much larger form. Outside, the world was a winter wasteland, the blizzard's violence replaced by an eerie silence that felt almost more menacing. Ellis rechecked every door and window, securing what he could. Kate brewed instant coffee and handed mugs around, her hands never quite steady. Riley sat by the radio, trying in vain to raise dispatch. Only static answered her, the line as dead as the land outside. Ben read the last page in the stack, voice shaking. It's all the same handwriting, this program-terminated stuff. These animals weren't just adopted out. It's like they were part of some experiment or training program. Kate's eyes narrowed. But why erase all evidence? And why hunt Ranger and the pup? There's more to this than some shut-down shelter. This is deliberate, organized. Riley barely heard them. She kept her phone on the table, screen cracked, battery flickering red. Part of her wanted to believe they were safe now, that whatever stalked them in the storm had moved on, but she knew better. Every instinct screamed that the danger was closer than ever. Then, as if summoned by her fears, the phone lit up with an incoming call. No number, just unknown caller, flashing on the screen. Riley's breath caught. She put it on speaker and braced herself. A man's voice, low and chillingly calm, filled the room. Deputy Morgan, you have something that belongs to me. No one spoke. The silence stretched, heavy with menace. The voice continued, utterly cold. Return the animals, both of them. Or you'll wish you had. You have until sundown. Riley fought to keep her tone steady. Who is this? If you hurt that dog, or any animal, you'll answer to the law. A dry chuckle echoed. You think the law matters out here? You're already trespassing, deputy. The dog and the pup are valuable assets. I'm giving you one chance. Leave them at the old Willow Ridge gate, walk away, and no one gets hurt. Ignore this warning, and you'll see what I can do. The line clicked dead. Riley stared at the phone, rage boiling in her chest. Kate was pale, fists clenched. Ben looked like he might be sick. Ellis strode to the door, locking it tight. We need to prepare, he said quietly. Whoever that was, he knows exactly where we are. For a moment, everyone was silent, each processing the magnitude of the threat. The shelter that had felt like a sanctuary now seemed more like a trap. Riley snapped into action. No one's taking Ranger or the pup. Ellis, help me check the windows. Ben, see if the generator can be patched enough to power the emergency lights. Kate, gather supplies. Anything we can use to defend ourselves or get out fast if we have to. They moved quickly, fear sharpening their focus. Ben struggled with the generator in the utility closet, swearing softly as he worked. Kate checked the med kits and found a flare gun and extra batteries. Ellis double-checked his sidearm and handed Riley a spare flashlight. Riley crouched beside Ranger, who leaned into her, eyes full of worry. "We're not going anywhere," she whispered. "I promised you that." In the small main room, they stacked heavy furniture against the doors and blacked out the windows with whatever they could find. Old blankets, trash bags, even file folders. Ben got the generator humming, and emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the room in a weak yellow glow. Ranger didn't rest. Every creak or gust outside put him on alert. The pup whimpered, but he calmed her with a gentle nudge. Afternoon dragged on. No one ate. No one laughed. Shadows crept across the floor as the sun crawled toward the horizon. At one point, Riley saw Ranger staring fixedly at the door, his muscles taut as wires. She wondered what horrors he'd witnessed at Willow Ridge, what secrets he carried that made him so desperate to protect the little one. Just before dusk, Kate gathered everyone. "If they come, they'll come soon. Are we ready?" Riley's answer was a grim nod. "We don't run. We don't give up the dogs. If we have to, there's a back exit through the exam room. Last resort." Ben looked at the photo of Max and Ranger, tears bright in his eyes. He saved her. Maybe saved all of us. We owe him. As the sun faded and the last light bled from the sky, the shelter became a fortress of hope against a sea of cold and darkness. Ellis watched the yard, gun ready. Kate kept the med bag close. Ben hugged the pup, whispering comfort. Riley sat beside Ranger, hand on his head, heart racing. No one's taking you, no matter what. Outside, darkness pressed in. Somewhere, in the growing night, the hunter circled, waiting. Inside, every soul braced for what would come next, ready to fight for each other, no matter the cost. And as the first footsteps crunched in the snow outside, Ranger lifted his head, let out a long, echoing howl, and the battle for survival truly began. The first echoes of night pressed in, thick and heavy. But inside the battered wildlife center, Riley, Ellis, Kate, Ben, and their two charges, Ranger and the pup, waited in taut silence. Time seemed to slow, every second stretched thin by the threat looming just beyond the doors. Ranger remained on high alert, ears pricked, every muscle tense. Every so often he'd glance at the pup, reassuring her with a gentle nudge or the brush of his nose. But his gaze always flicked back to the shadows outside, as if daring the night to challenge him. Suddenly, a scratching at the rear door sent Ben nearly jumping from his seat. Ranger was already moving, hackles up, nose to the gap at the bottom of the door. He barked, short, sharp, and urgent. Riley shot to her feet, motioning everyone to stay back as she pressed her eye to the peephole. Nothing but blackness. She turned to Ellis. "If anyone tries to get in, they're not getting the jump on us." But Ranger seemed agitated, not just alert. His attention wasn't on the immediate threat of a break-in. Instead, he pawed at the door and gave a low whine, his eyes pleading. Riley hesitated, then bent down beside him, scratching gently behind his ears. "What is it, boy? What do you smell?" Kate stepped up, voice tight. "Sometimes animals sense things we can't. He might be picking up a scent. Maybe blood." Riley nodded grimly, then turned to the others. "We stay together. Ellis, cover me. Ben, Kate. You two keep the pup close. Ranger wants us to follow. Let's see where he leads." The wind outside had faded to a low whisper, but the snow underfoot was treacherous, crunching with every step. Ranger moved ahead, nose to the ground, tail low, utterly focused. He led them around the side of the building, through the skeletal remains of the once tidy wildlife garden, and toward the tree line at the edge of the property. At first, Riley saw nothing but endless white, pockmarked with animal tracks. Then she spotted it, a fresh trail of blood, smeared in the snow, leading into the woods. Ranger sniffed it, let out a mournful whimper, and pressed forward with new urgency. Ellis glanced at Riley, his voice low. This could be a trap. Or it could be someone in trouble, she shot back, determination hardening her words. Either way, we can't ignore it. Ranger plunged into the trees, moving faster now. The others followed, boots slipping on hidden ice, breath steaming in the cold. The forest seemed to close around them, swallowing the feeble light of their flashlights. Every branch was a claw, every shadow a threat. Deeper and deeper they went, the trail twisting between ancient firs and fallen logs. Ben stumbled, clutching the pup tight. Kate's eyes darted nervously, but she pressed on, unwilling to let anyone fall behind. Suddenly, Ranger stopped. He circled a small snowdrift, sniffed, and barked once. Urgent. Desperate. Riley knelt beside him, her own breath catching as her flashlight beam swept over something half buried in the snow. It was the crumpled, frozen form of a woman. She was dressed in heavy winter gear, her face ashen, lips blue, a scattering of blood staining the snow around her. Her gloved hand still gripped a cell phone, its screen cracked but faintly glowing. Riley reached out with trembling fingers, gently brushing the snow from her face. "Cassie Monroe," Kate whispered, eyes filling with sorrow. She volunteered at Willow Ridge before it was shut down. She was always talking about protecting the animals, about how the center wasn't what it seemed. Riley checked for a pulse, but there was none. Cassie was gone, her body cold and stiff. Still, her last moments had been spent fighting. There was a strength in the way she was positioned, as if she'd shielded herself from something or someone. Ellis crouched down, examining the scene. She didn't freeze to death. That wound on her side, that's a knife, or maybe a sharp tool. She bled out before anyone could help. Ben's voice quivered. "Do you think she was trying to get away from whoever's after Ranger and the pup?" Kate nodded, tears threatening to spill. Cassie loved those dogs. She must have tried to help them escape. Paid the price for it. Riley gently pried the phone from Cassie's fingers. She scrolled through the last few messages, her hands shaking, until she found a note in the drafts folder, never sent. "If you find this, please, protect Ranger and the little one. They're after them. Don't trust anyone from Willow Ridge." "I'm sorry. I tried." Riley's jaw clenched. She died trying to do the right thing. We owe her. We owe all of them. A sudden movement startled them. Ranger stood perfectly still, then turned and fixed his gaze on a spot deeper in the woods. He let out a single, mournful howl. In the silence that followed, the truth hit them all. Ranger had witnessed everything. He'd seen Cassie's last moments. He'd seen the violence and fear, and now he bore the scars, inside and out. Ellis pressed a gentle hand to Ranger's head. "You did everything you could, old boy. She'd be proud." Kate knelt beside Cassie, head bowed in silent grief. Ben clutched the pup, who whimpered in confusion and sadness, sensing the sorrow around her. Riley stood, anger and resolve burning in her chest. "We take Cassie back with us. We tell her story, and we protect Ranger and the pup no matter what." Together, they fashioned a makeshift stretcher from fallen branches in their own jackets, lifting Cassie's body gently from the snow. Ranger walked beside her, head low, but every step was purposeful, a silent tribute to the woman who had given everything for him and his kind. The hike back to Hollow Creek was slow and silent. The world felt heavier, the shadows deeper, but inside, each heart was a spark, a promise not to let Cassie's sacrifice be in vain. When they reached the center, Kate covered Cassie with a clean blanket, whispering a final farewell. Ben placed the pup beside Ranger, who nuzzled her protectively. Riley read the message from Cassie's phone aloud, her voice clear and strong. "We protect them. We fight. We finish what she started." And as night closed in again, Riley knew one thing for certain. The fight wasn't over. But as long as they stood together, with Ranger leading the way, hope would not die. Night returned with a heaviness that pressed on every wall of the Hollow Creek Wildlife Center. Inside, the mood was somber, but beneath the grief simmered a hard resolve. Cassie Monroe's sacrifice would not be for nothing. Riley, Ellis, Kate, Ben, Ranger, and the pup formed an unspoken pact, a stubborn bulwark against the dark. They kept Cassie's body respectfully covered, waiting for first light to contact the authorities. But rest would not come. Everyone moved quietly, each glance at Ranger and the pup a reminder of why they fought. The old German shepherd watched the doors as if expecting the worst, his body between the pup and the world. Ellis stood at the barricaded entrance, revolver in hand. Ben stayed close to Kate, helping her clean and rebandage Ranger's wound, the pup curled at their feet. Riley prowled from window to window, flashlight beam piercing the darkness. It was just past midnight when the knock came, sharp, insistent, and utterly out of place in the frozen stillness. Ellis spun, raising his weapon. Riley motioned for everyone to stay low. Another knock, this time softer, followed by a calm, practiced voice. "Sheriff's office. Anyone inside? Identify yourself." Riley's eyes narrowed. "That's not any voice I know," she whispered. Ellis agreed, jaw tight. "Stay back. Let me talk." He called out, "This is Sheriff Ellis. Identify yourself and show your badge under the porch light." A shadow moved outside the door, stepping into the weak pool of yellow. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a snow-dusted parka, gloved hands empty and held out. "Name's Victor Kane. I'm here to help. We got a report about someone in distress up here. Mind letting me in, out of the cold?" Ben's eyes widened. "Victor Kane? Wasn't he on the Willow Ridge staff list?" Kate nodded, icy fear in her gaze. Riley's grip tightened on her sidearm. "Get the scanner," she whispered. Ellis cracked the door, keeping his gun hidden but ready. "You alone, Mr. Kane?" Victor nodded, face pleasant but eyes sharp. "Roads are hell, but I found a shortcut through the woods. Lucky for you." Riley forced a polite tone. "We're fine. Situation under control. You can wait here while we call your credentials in." Victor's smile faltered. "No need for that. You've got 2 dogs that need serious medical care. I can take them to the city shelter right now." Ranger suddenly lunged, lips curled in a deep, menacing growl. The dog's reaction was so swift and violent that Ben staggered back, nearly tripping over the pup. Victor flinched, hand twitching toward his belt before he remembered he was trying to play the hero. Kate kept her eyes on Ranger as she pulled out the portable chip scanner and passed it to Riley. "Scan him now. Let's see what we're dealing with." Riley pressed the scanner to Ranger's shoulder. A faint beep, then the tiny screen flickered to life. She read aloud, voice trembling with anger. "Program terminated. Asset ID RGR12. Do not recover. Do not report." A cold hush fell over the room. Victor stepped back, the smile gone. "That's classified." "You have no right." Ellis cut him off. "We have every right. You ran Willow Ridge. Those cages, those files. What the hell were you doing out there?" Victor's eyes hardened. "You don't know what you're meddling with. That dog and the pup are property, company assets. You're interfering in federal business." Riley's voice was low, lethal. "That's not what Cassie Monroe thought. She died protecting them. We found her body. We found your files, too. And now you're going to answer for all of it." Victor took a slow step toward the door. "You're making a mistake. Return them to me, and we'll let this go. Otherwise," Ranger growled louder, placing himself between Victor and the pup, hackles raised. Ben whispered, "He remembers you. He remembers everything." Kate stepped forward, voice trembling with fury. "What were you really doing at Willow Ridge? Therapy program? Behavioral experiments? Why erase all evidence?" Victor's mask slipped. "We were developing specialized service dogs for military and security contracts. Ranger was one of our best, until he turned unpredictable. Cassie interfered, tried to save him and the pup. She broke protocol." "There was an accident," Ellis barked. "You call that an accident? You call what happened to those animals a protocol?" Victor's eyes flicked to the front door, calculating. "I'm walking out of here with the dogs. Move, or I'll call in people who won't be as polite as I am." Riley shook her head, standing her ground. "No one's taking these dogs. Not tonight. Not ever." The confrontation hung in the air, every second stretching taut as wire. Then Victor made his move, lunging for the pup, shoving Ben aside. But Ranger exploded into motion, leaping between Victor and the pup with a force that belied his injuries. He knocked Victor off balance, teeth flashing. Ellis leveled his gun. "Don't move, Kane!" Victor backed away, chest heaving, rage twisting his face. "You have no idea who you're messing with. This isn't over." Kate tossed him the bloodied collar from the Willow Ridge files. "You're right. It's not. The sheriff's office, the press, the county, everyone's going to know. You're done here." Victor glared at each of them in turn, then spun on his heel and disappeared into the night, his threats lingering long after he was gone. The tension in the room broke like a wave. Ranger slumped to the floor, chest heaving. Ben scooped up the trembling pup, tears streaking his cheeks. Kate hugged Ranger fiercely, whispering, "You're safe. It's over." Ellis radioed the sheriff's office, voice steady but urgent. Riley sat down heavily beside Ranger, her hand finding his head. "You did good, boy. You protected everyone." As the adrenaline faded, exhaustion crashed in. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but this time it felt lighter, gentler, as if the world itself was sighing in relief. But deep down, Riley knew it wasn't truly over. Victor Kane was gone, but his shadow remained. Still, tonight, they'd won. And as Ranger pressed close to the pup, surrounded by his new family, hope felt stronger than ever. The night after Victor Kane's confrontation stretched long and restless, but dawn arrived gentle, as if the world itself wanted to offer something like peace. Pale sunlight crept through frosted windows, shining on faces worn by worry, but alive with hope. Outside, the wind had dropped to a whisper, and the sky over Hollow Creek Wildlife Center was a soft, bruised blue. Kate was the first to stir, rising stiffly from where she'd fallen asleep, curled up beside Ranger and the pup. She smiled when she saw them both, Ranger breathing deep and steady, the tiny pup still tucked against his belly. Ben, sprawled on a makeshift cot, yawned and blinked away the exhaustion of so many sleepless hours. Ellis, after checking the barricades one last time, let out a deep sigh and finally holstered his weapon. Riley had slept little, mind still racing with everything that had happened. Cassie Monroe's body was respectfully prepared in the back room, awaiting the arrival of the county coroner. The events of the night before felt both immediate and distant. A fever dream, with consequences that would ripple far beyond the storm. By mid-morning, the first sheriff's deputies arrived, snow tires crunching over the refrozen gravel. The chaos of the storm had kept them away, but now the isolation was broken. Cameras, crime scene tape, official statements, all the trappings of justice slowly swept through Hollow Creek. Ellis met them at the door, his posture calm and commanding as he relayed the night's events. Riley handed over the files from Willow Ridge, the photo of Max and Ranger, and Cassie's unsent note. She spoke quietly but clearly, her testimony unwavering. The news spread quickly. Victor Kane was wanted for questioning in connection with Cassie's death, animal cruelty, evidence tampering, and multiple counts of fraud. Local news vans soon arrived, reporters hungry for the story of a brave therapy dog, a deadly blizzard, and a corrupt organization finally brought to light. Through it all, Ranger remained at the center of attention. Officers, reporters, and animal control staff came and went, but he stayed close to the people who had saved him. Ben had named the pup Aspen, for her willowy strength and the way she survived the storm's harshest hours. Aspen never strayed far from Ranger, watching the world with wide, uncertain eyes, but never trembling as long as he was near. Kate fielded questions from the press, her tone measured and strong. She explained how Cassie had tried to protect the animals at Willow Ridge, how the therapy dog program had become something twisted and cruel, and how Ranger and Aspen had fought to survive against all odds. Riley found herself on the phone with Max's family. Max, now living in another state, had never stopped searching for Ranger, but the trail had gone cold after Willow Ridge closed. When Riley described Ranger's bravery and the bond he'd formed with Aspen and his new pack, Max's mother wept with gratitude. Arrangements were made for Max to visit Hollow Creek. If Ranger was willing, he might soon be reunited with the boy, he once comforted. As afternoon wore on, the Wildlife Center buzzed with an odd mix of relief and sadness. Cassie's memory was honored with a small vigil out back, beneath the snow-laden trees she loved. Ben read aloud her note, voice quavering but clear. "If you find this, please protect Ranger and the little one. They're after them. Don't trust anyone from Willow Ridge. I'm sorry, I tried. They stood together, Riley, Kate, Ben, Ellis, and a few officers, heads bowed, the weight of loss softened by the knowledge that Cassie's courage had saved lives. Ranger sat quietly beside the blanket-draped form, head bowed in silent respect, with Aspen nestled against his side. In the following days, the county announced formal charges against Victor Kane and his associates. The Willow Ridge property was seized, and authorities began the difficult work of locating other missing animals, piecing together years of deception and pain. Ranger's story spread online, sparking an outpouring of support and offers to adopt both him and Aspen. But Kate was clear. They've found their home here, at least for now. We owe them that much. With the worst behind them, the Wildlife Center's staff began to dream again. Riley, Ben, and Kate sat down together and drafted a new vision for Hollow Creek. Not just a shelter, but a trauma-informed rescue center, one that would provide sanctuary for animals and people alike, a place where healing could finally begin. Ranger and Aspen became the heart of that vision. Their courage inspired volunteers and donors. Children visited the center just to meet them, and the local paper ran a photo of Ranger and Aspen side by side, one strong and scarred, the other small but spirited, both survivors. Riley noticed how the scars on Ranger's side faded with time, how he began to relax when strangers came near, how he allowed himself to trust, if only little by little. She saw the same change in Ben, who found new confidence in caring for Aspen, and in Kate, who smiled more and spent less time haunted by her own past. One evening, as snowflakes drifted down in gentle spirals, the team gathered by the fireplace in the Wildlife Center's main room. Ranger rested his head in Riley's lap, Aspen curled beside him. Ben laughed as Aspen tried to nibble his shoelaces. Kate sipped coffee and watched the scene, eyes shining. Ellis raised a mug and toast. To Cassie Monroe, and to every soul who refuses to give up, no matter how long the night. Riley nodded, her hand gentle on Ranger's head. To starting over, and to finding family where you least expect it. The center was quiet, the fire warm, and for the first time since the blizzard, everyone felt safe. Ranger thumped his tail. Aspen yawned and snuggled closer. Outside, the Montana woods lay hushed and clean beneath a blanket of new snow. The old wounds of Willow Ridge would take time to heal, but the world had changed. Just a little, because of one storm, 2 brave dogs, and the people who chose to stand with them. And as the light faded, Riley looked around at her friends, her family, and felt hope take root, strong and wild as anything that could survive the cold. Night had fallen softly on Hollow Creek, the kind of night where the Montana sky was deep and infinite, the stars blazing cold and beautiful over the snow-blanketed land. The world seemed quiet at last. No more howling wind, no more fear at the door, just the hush of peace settling into every drift, every shadow, every heart that had survived the storm. Inside the Wildlife Center, a new energy filled the rooms. It wasn't just relief, it was something deeper, a sense of being changed. Riley wandered through the halls, pausing to listen to the sound of laughter echoing from the kitchen, where Ben and Kate bickered gently over how to prepare Aspen's dinner. Ellis sat near the front desk, quietly organizing Cassie's old files. A small act of respect and remembrance. Riley found herself drawn to the big window facing the meadow. There, Ranger lay stretched out on a faded blanket, the firelight casting his fur in gold and copper. Aspen tumbled at his feet, nipping at his tail, her puppy clumsiness drawing a rare, gentle huff of amusement from the old shepherd. Riley watched them for a while, letting the simple joy of their play dissolve some of her remaining tension. When Ranger caught her gaze, he thumped his tail and gave her that look. Wise, patient, a silent invitation. Riley grabbed her coat and opened the door, shivering as she stepped out into the night. The stars spilled overhead, sharp as diamonds. She called softly, and Ranger rose, shaking himself, and padded out to join her. Aspen followed close behind, bounding through the snow, as if she'd always belonged in this wild, free place. Riley sat on the steps, and Ranger settled beside her, pressing his big head against her leg. For a while, they just breathed the cold air together, sharing a silence that was full of gratitude and memory. Aspen, tired from her play, curled into a ball at Riley's feet. Kate appeared behind them, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She eased herself down beside Riley, her eyes reflecting starlight and something older. Sorrow, maybe, but also a kind of peace. "You ever wonder," Kate said quietly, "why some creatures survive things that should break them? What makes them keep going, even when there's nothing left but pain?" Riley thought for a moment, rubbing Ranger's ear. Maybe it's love, or hope, or just stubbornness. Kate smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "He could have given up, Riley. You saw him that first night, half frozen, bleeding, carrying that pup like she was his own. Most animals would have let go, but not him." Riley looked down at Ranger, her voice soft. "You're right. He made a choice. He chose to fight, to protect her, even when he was dying." Kate reached out and touched Ranger's fur. "You're a good boy," she murmured. "The best." Ranger's only answer was to wag his tail, slow and sure, as if to say, "I know." Ben joined them, mug of hot chocolate in his hand. "It's weird, but I think Cassie knew. She saw something in him. Maybe she saw what she needed to be. Brave, no matter what." Ellis stepped outside, hands in his pockets, his silhouette strong against the pale snow. "Cassie saved a lot more than just these two," he said, nodding at Ranger and Aspen. "She saved all of us, in her way." The four of them sat in the hush of the evening, the memory of Cassie and so many others settling around them like a blessing. Aspen, sensing the weight of the moment, snuggled against Ranger and let out a long puppy sigh. Riley looked up at the sky. Cassie used to say the stars were promises, reminders that even in the worst darkness, there's still light somewhere, if you look for it. They sat together a little longer, talking quietly, sharing stories, and silent thanks. The wildlife center behind them was a different place now, not just a shelter, but a home, a sanctuary for any soul battered by life's storms. As the cold grew sharper, they slipped back inside, the warmth of the fire welcoming them. Ranger paused in the doorway, taking one last look at the sky, as if to say a private goodbye to the old life, the fear, the pain, the loneliness, and stepped into the light. Later, Kate sat with Ranger beneath the big window. Aspen curled beside them. She stroked the shepherd's fur and whispered so only he could hear, "You could have given up, but you chose love." Ranger gazed back at her, eyes bright with understanding, then gave a single, slow wag of his tail. Riley watched them from across the room, her heart full. She thought about all that had happened, about scars and healing, about loss and the strange, beautiful ways life could begin again after everything was broken. She saw it in Ranger, in Aspen, in Ben's new confidence, in Kate's softer smile, in Ellis's steady calm. She felt it in herself, a hope she hadn't believed in for years, burning warm and true. As midnight neared, Riley went to the center's front desk and found the old social media camera Cassie used for rescue updates. She snapped a photo. Ranger, Aspen, Ben, Kate, Ellis, all together by the fire. She posted it with a message. "If this story touched your heart, share it. Tell someone what true loyalty looks like. Follow us for more tales of courage, redemption, and the healing power of our four-legged guardians." Her finger hovered over the post button, and she smiled. She wasn't sure who would read it, or who might need it. But she knew the story mattered, because everyone, somewhere, faces their own storm. Everyone needs a reason to keep going, a reminder that love and hope can survive the coldest night. Riley closed her eyes, listening to the peaceful sounds of her new family, the soft whimper of a dreaming puppy, the gentle thump of a loyal tail, the steady breath of friends who'd weathered the storm together. She whispered her own promise to the night. No matter what comes, we choose love. We choose to protect. We choose to hope. And beneath the endless Montana stars, the story of Ranger and Aspen, of courage, sacrifice, and the simple saving power of kindness, lived on, a beacon for anyone searching for light in the darkness.